Y&R Spoilers that next week reveal the coming days in Genoa City promise to be suffocating and full of tension as a series of relationships, secrets, and confrontations explode at the same time. Everything starts with a seemingly simple but pivotal choice of Jack Abbott, when he decides to share an important secret with Nikki Newman. It's not just about exchanging information, but also the moment Jack admits he can't shoulder it all alone, forcing him to seek out a familiar yet complicated ally in the Newman family. While Jack struggles to deal with the approaching storm, Victor Newman refuses to stay out of the game. He confronts Matt Clark, who appears like a ghost from the past under the name Mitch, carrying the dangerous smell of calculated intrigue. On another front, Winters and Phyllis are also ready to rush into a new clash. Both are strong, intelligent women who are used to not backing down from anyone, so it is not difficult to guess that when they confront each other, it will not be just a few harsh words, but a collision between two egos, two views on life and justice, signaling a series of conflicts in the coming days. However, the emotional focus of everything at this moment lies in a much smaller, more confined space. The cramped storage room where Noah Newman and Sienna Bacall are still trapped. The sound of knocking on the door, their cries for help echo off the cold wall and then fall into silence, leaving a feeling of helplessness that is getting thicker and thicker. They understand that in this place, no one will accidentally pass by close enough to hear, no miracle will easily appear. They cannot just lie still, wait in despair and let fear swallow them. The silence between them was not only a wordless void, but also a tension of thought. If they did not find a way to escape, perhaps no one would come in time to save them. In the weak light coming through the crack in the door, Sienna began to carefully observe every corner of the wall, every wooden shelf, every forgotten item in the room. She did not allow herself to succumb to the rising panic. Finally, Sienna seemed to discover something that could become a key to hope, maybe a tool, a loose structure, or a detail that normal people would easily overlook. She immediately called Noah back, not with panic but with determination. The two of them tried each possibility together, working together to take advantage of what Sienna had just found, trying to break some weak point in the room. The effort was not easy, sweat, fatigue and fear intertwined, but they persevered. However, despite their best efforts, all their attempts stopped at the threshold of almost opening, almost breaking the door open, but then everything collapsed, leaving a harsh truth: their escape plan still seemed insufficient, still unable to bring freedom. Hope was stretched to the breaking point, but at least Noah and Sienna understood that they had crossed the first threshold, the threshold of sitting still and accepting their fate. Meanwhile, outside the dark warehouse, Nick Newman and Sharon Newman were not standing still. They received a clue from Matt, a seemingly innocuous sign, but opened a new line of investigation. Although they understood that they could not completely trust anything coming from Matt, neither Nick nor Sharon had the right to ignore any details, especially when their son was missing. They followed the trail, and then, as if by fate, a second clue appeared. This time, the new information led them to a hopeful and worrying conclusion. Noah was probably very close to what he was pursuing, close to the truth, or close to Matt's hiding place, or close to the end of this dangerous game. The feeling that Noah was almost there both made them proud of their son's courage and perseverance, and made them panic, knowing that the closer Noah got to the truth, the more likely he was to fall into unpredictable danger. Nick and Sharon quickly realized that they could not stand alone against an enemy as familiar with darkness, deception, and high-stakes moves as Matt. Finally, they made the decision they had probably thought about from the beginning: call Victor for help. It was not just a call for help, but also an admission that they needed the full strength, connections, and experience of the Newman patriarch. Victor Newman, with his instincts to protect his family burning, immediately took action. There was no room for hesitation, especially when Noah and Matt were mentioned in the same story. He quickly traveled to Los Angeles, not only as a worried grandfather, but also as a strategist who was all too familiar with life and death chess games. As soon as he arrived, Victor wasted no time in beating around the bush and confronted Matt head-on. Meanwhile, Nick and Sharon, the couple once affectionately called Chick by fans, were cornered. They were caught between guilt for not protecting Noah, fear of what might have happened in that dark room, and pressure from Matt, who always knew how to exploit others' weaknesses to manipulate. Matt was more than just an opponent. He liked to corner his prey, gauge their every reaction, and gradually tighten the siege. He began to pressure Noah, using psychological tricks, threats, and even illusions of terrible consequences if Noah did not cooperate. In that moment, Noah was not only facing an enemy, but also had to fight with his own fear and doubt, whether he was strong enough not to collapse under the pressure, whether his efforts to find a way out while locked in that room were really bringing him closer to freedom, or just pushing him further into danger. However, if there was one thing Matt misjudged, it was that he saw Victor as just a grandfather anxious to find his grandson. On the same day he tried to use every means to force Noah into obedience, Victor cleverly turned the tables. With his experience, he turned the tables on an enemy who seemed to have complete control. In that confrontation, Victor not only proves that he is still the familiar tiger of the business world and the family battlefield, but also that he knows how to protect what belongs to him with both sharpness and ruthlessness when necessary. In just one day, the balance of power begins to shake. Matt can no longer manipulate everyone as easily as before. His plan shows the first cracks, while Victor's appearance opens up a new hope for Noah, for Nick, for Sharon, and for everyone caught up in this dangerous vortex. Elsewhere in the city, Jack is still facing the consequences of the secret he shared with Nikki. Lily and Phyllis are about to explode in their own confrontation. All of these pieces, though taking place in different spaces and relationships, are starting to move in the same direction, a week where every mask, every intrigue and every allegiance will be put on the scale, and each character will have to choose to stand firm or be swept away in the approaching storm. The atmosphere in Genoa City thickened as a series of relationships touched the most sensitive lines between love, pride, and ambition for power. At the center of those emotional tremors, the confrontation between Lily and Phyllis was not just a normal argument, but a moment that forced Lily to look straight into her heart. She could deny it, could tell herself that it was all about principle or pride, but if she had completely given up on Cain, if her feelings had truly died, perhaps she would not have been so upset when she saw him involved with Phyllis. Jealousy is not always a sign of love, but for Lily, it felt like an old wound that had not fully healed, accidentally touched by someone. Every sarcastic word, every cold look she gave Phyllis was a mixture of disappointment, hurt and something close to regret. Cain may no longer be the man she wanted to be with, but his presence next to someone like Phyllis, who always knew how to challenge the limits of every relationship, made it difficult for Lily to maintain her calm appearance. While Lily struggled with the emotions that she herself still wanted to deny, another chess game was being silently set by Victor aimed directly at Cain. Victor was not the type of person to act impulsively. If he had decided to set a trap, it meant that every step, every turn, every choice of the opponent had been calculated in advance. Cain, no matter how clever he was, would still find it difficult to avoid becoming a controlled pawn if he dared to step into Victor's sphere of influence. The trap here was not just a simple plan of revenge, but could be a test of loyalty, of human nature, of who deserved to stand in the circle of power that Victor outlined for his family. In his eyes, anyone who approaches his relatives or touches the interests of Newman Enterprises must be evaluated, weighed, and even, if necessary, dragged into a dead-end battle of wits. At the same time, the Abbott family cannot stand aside from the rising storms. Chabot, their pride, the legacy associated with so much sweat, tears and struggle, is once again facing the risk of being attacked. Although the danger has not been specifically named, everyone understands that if they are not prepared, if they do not have a clear strategy to protect Chabot, just a small mistake is enough to make the whole family pay dearly. The closed meetings, tense exchanges, and silent glances between Abbott members now revolve not only around business results or market share, but also the question, are they united enough to stand firm against forces that want to take advantage of internal weaknesses? Strategizing is not only a business problem, but also a test of trust between brothers, of whether they dare to put their egos aside to protect Chabot as a true family. On the other side of the city, Audra is immersed in her own battle between pride and fear of losing everything. Once again, she has to humble herself to beg Nate Hastings, the man she both desires to hold and hates for the pull he has on her future and her heart. Audra is beautiful, smart, sharp enough that she should never have to beg anyone to give her another chance. She knows it, and the thought makes each time she begs Nate feel like a slap in the face to her ego. The pleas were not just a plea for love again, but also the panic of a woman who saw everything she had ever counted on, her career, her power, her place in Newman's world, at risk of unraveling if she lost her connection to Nate. Every time she lowered her voice, Audra felt as if she were losing a part of the pride that had protected her during her years of climbing the ladder of ambition. But even as her heart screamed that she shouldn't, the fear of losing power forced her to continue. While Audra struggles to keep Nate by her side, Jack is quietly passing on another secret to Nikki. Jack's sharing of the secret with Nikki not only demonstrates the seriousness of the information, but also shows that he is placing his trust in someone who used to be on the opposition side. Nikki is not Abbott, but she understands the power dynamics in Genoa City better than many. When Jack chooses her as his confidant, it means he accepts to drag her into the spiral that is swirling around Jabot, Victor, and the entire fragile balance between the two families. The secret may be related to Victor, to Jabot, to the steps Jack is forced to consider between protecting his family and avoiding provoking an all-out war with Newman. Nikki's presence in this story is a strange intermediary, both Victor's wife and someone who can understand Jack in a way no one else can. Jack's trust in her is therefore both reckless and hopeful. While Jack and Nikki dealt with the mystery, Diane Jenkins Abbott and Kyle took a more proactive approach. They began digging for information about Victor. For Diane, tapping into Victor's world was like entering the territory of a seasoned predator. But if they did nothing, they would remain passive, always waiting for the next strike. Kyle, with his Jabot air mentality, knew he couldn't just stand back and watch. His mother's investigation into Victor likely stemmed from the fear that any move by Newman would directly affect Jabot and the Abbott family. They weren't looking to attack, but wanted to know as much as possible so that if Victor was indeed hiding something, they wouldn't be caught off guard. But digging for information about someone like Victor always carried a risk. If discovered, it could be seen as a provocation, pushing the already tense relationship between the two families to the brink of irreparable ruin. While the adults are lining up on the chessboard of power, the younger generation is not out of the picture. Claire Grace Newman, with both Newman blood and mental scars from the past, once again lost control of her emotions and lost her temper with Audra. For Claire, losing her temper is not just an impulsive reaction, but the result of feeling that someone is intentionally hiding the truth from her or manipulating the story in their favor. Audra has always been a name that makes it difficult for others to completely trust, and for Claire, that feeling is even stronger. When Audra speaks or remains silent, Claire feels like she is being left out of a story that she has a right to know. The situation becomes even more tense when Holden Novak decides to tell Claire about his past with Audra. Audra is not at all happy with this. For her, it is a memory that she wants to lock away, to bury along with the plans and calculations that have brought her to the present. Audra's anger wasn't just because Holden brought up the past, but because he dared to drag Claire, someone she thought she could still control or direct, into that secret area. In Audra's eyes, Holden was destroying the fragile balance she had worked so hard to build, forcing her to confront parts of her past she didn't want others to see. However, from Holden's perspective, he thought that telling what had happened between them was the only way to keep the bigger secret they were hiding. Some secrets can only be protected by admitting part of the truth. If Claire was kept in the dark, she would continue to dig deeper, continue to doubt, continue to press into things that Holden and Audra didn't want to be revealed. By proactively sharing part of the past, Holden hoped to divert Claire's gaze away from the most dangerous part of the story. Of course, that didn't make Audra any less angry, because for her, any crack in the perfect shell she worked so hard to build was a threat. In this context, Nate's growing closeness to Claire's mother becomes a new layer of pressure for Audra. The ever-tightening bond between Nate and the woman who has such a profound influence on Claire's emotional life makes Audra feel like her position is being diminished. She not only faces the risk of losing Nate emotionally, but also of losing her position and the power structure he is a part of. As the man she both loves and needs begins to infiltrate Claire's life and family, Audra feels like she is being pushed to the edge of a story where she should be the main character. All of those pressures combined, from having to beg Nate, being betrayed by Holden by telling the past, being publicly angry by Claire, to feeling the shadows of Victor, Jack, Diane, Kyle and the Abbott family and the Newman clan moving in a way that is not beneficial to her. Push Audra closer to the line that once crossed, she will become a complete villain. An intelligent, ambitious woman, being pushed into a corner, gradually losing control, that is always the perfect formula to ignite extreme decisions. If before Audra still kept a bit of moderation, still thought about the consequences, still hesitated between becoming a manipulator or a victim, now each event, each push, each crack in the surrounding relationships is gradually blurring that line. The upcoming week in Genoa City is therefore not just a series of discrete events, but tight links connected into a vortex of emotions and power. Lily faces the truth about her feelings for Kane, while Phyllis continues to be the catalyst that makes things explode. Victor calmly sets traps in silence, the Abbotts strategize to protect Jabot, Jack chooses Nikki as the secret keeper, Diane and Kyle recklessly dig deeper into Victor's world. On the younger side, Claire takes her anger out on Audra, Holden tries to balance protecting the secret and keeping Claire's trust, and Nate, perhaps intentionally or not, becomes the focus of the tangled emotional lines between Claire's mother and Audra. In all this movement, perhaps the scariest question is not who is right, who is wrong, but, when all the masks fall, who will become the reluctant hero, and who will accept to fully transform into the villain of their own life. Subscribe to our channel to update the latest news on our channel.